but we had hoped. Welcome to the Grow Time Biz Devo, where we explore God's principles for living a high-performance life. My name is Kenneth Ott. Today we're in Luke 24, and we're centering around this one verse, which I think is a verse that we can all relate to if you have any desires in life, if you have any ambitions and you're chasing something great. And the little snippet of the verse is, but we had hoped. Like hope is gone. Hope is in the past tense. We had hoped. So this is verse 20. So this is Luke 24, and it's the story of, it's called the road to Emmaus. And it's where two disciples are traveling down the road, and Jesus meets them. And actually, Jesus had just been crucified, and he rose from the dead, and he meets them on the road, but they don't know it's him. And they've been discouraged, and you could hear they're lacking energy. So I'm going to start actually in verse 17, and I'm going to skip around a little bit. So verse 17, this is Jesus speaking. And he said to them, "What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are so sad?" He had just met them on this road. They're walking to Emmaus. Then one of those, whose name was Cleopas, answered and said to him, Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem? And have you not known the things which happened there in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" So they said to him, "The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all people, and how the chief priests and the rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him." Here it comes. "But we had hoped that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the third day since these things happened." So I just want to mention there that the context of this is that Israel has been under Roman rule, and like they've been under oppression, and they've been waiting for someone to liberate them. And Jesus comes, and he doesn't liberate them in the way they think, but he still does these amazing things. And so he gives them a lot of hope for the future, and he births Christianity and the church. And then it seems like, and he's telling them this is going to happen. He told them that he was going to rise from dead and all that kind of stuff, but it happens. And we've all been there. Like when you're going through something, I've been in situations where like I believe something is going to happen. I have vision for the thing. Maybe it's a business deal, or maybe it's an idea that was put into my head, and I'm running after it, and I have so much belief in it. And then I get down the path. Maybe I'm even guaranteed it in some way because I believe it's for me. Maybe there have been times where I've been literally like shown something in a miraculous way from God. Like, this is the thing you're supposed to be doing, and it's going to be good. And then I go through it, and you start to walk through it. And then you start to get discouraged with the circumstances of the situations as you're walking through it. And that happens to me quite often, actually. So it's interesting how they knew these things, but yet they still were in the situation, and they were like, we had hoped. It's not we hope, or we still hope, or we have hope. It's we had hoped. And so they're discouraged. Verse 22, "Yes, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us. When they did not find his body, they came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who had said that he was alive." It's interesting how, again, like I'm bringing this up because like I know we've all felt this. Like I feel this too sometimes. It's like you're shown things that are hopeful and are good, but you're still discouraged. It's like you can't shake it. Like they just heard that he rose from the dead, and and the lady saw a vision and saw angels, and they're still lacking hope and discouraged and sad. And I can relate to that. So here's what's interesting. What Jesus does is he doesn't like he He doesn't berate them for their lack of hope, but he actually does something really cool. And I think that's the hope for me and for us. So verse 24, and certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but him they did not see. Then he said to them, O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded them in all the scriptures, the things concerning himself. So he basically preaches at them and preaches to them and the way he had done before. And so they continue on this road, right? And so they get close to their village, and they basically say, Jesus says, I'm gonna go a different way. And they say, no, come in and eat with us. And so this is verse 30. It says, now it came to pass, as he sat at the table with them, that's Jesus, that he took the bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Sounds a lot like what Jesus used to do in the past with them, right? 31, then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight immediately. And they said to one another, did not our heart burn within us while he walked with us on the road, and while he opened the scriptures to us? So they rose up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem and found the 11 and those who were with them and gathered together, saying, the Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon. And they told about things that had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of bread. They got up from dinner. It was dark in the middle of the night, maybe in the middle of the night. This was a long journey, and they ran back to Jerusalem. Because they realize that this is Jesus. So the last little bit here, verse 36. Now, as they said these things, Jesus himself, they're in the group, like they're back in Jerusalem. Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and said to them, peace to you. But they were terrified and frightened and supposed that they had seen a spirit. And he said to them, why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? Behold my hands and my feet, that it is myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see I have. And when he said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. But while they still did not believe for joy and marveled, he said to them, have you any food here? So they gave him a piece of broiled fish and some honeycomb, and he took it and ate it in their presence. That's really interesting. He shows them all the other things, and he's like, okay, I'm going to eat to show you that I'm a real person. And that's where we're going to end in this little passage today. And so there's a few things that I think are really positive for if you're discouraged, if you're in a situation where you're losing hope or you don't have hope, because certainly I have been, and in some ways I am right now. In fact, if you're like anyone else, like day to day, that might actually change. And so if that's you, there's some interesting things that we can take away from here for leaders, for people that are really have strong desires, that they're going after big things that might also have big discouragement along the way. And so the first one is this: it's clearly okay to lose hope, right? It happens. You shouldn't even be ashamed of it. Now, I've talked before, actually many times, and Jesus talks about this a lot, that belief is maybe the number one thing that determines success in any situation. And I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs across all sorts of things, very successful ones that aren't successful, ones that have good ideas, ones that have bad ideas. And what's interesting is that the single biggest factor in determining success for any one of those people is not the quality of the idea. It's not the resources they have. It's not the talents they have. It's not even the money they have. Those things can all help, but it's actually their belief. It's the decision that they're going to actually go and do this thing, and they believe in it so much that they're going to push through and figure out whatever's required along the way. That is the single biggest factor in success in anything. And I've learned that I've paid a lot of money to learn that. I've had to learn it through a lot of different lessons, but I've learned that. And so what's interesting is that while that's super important, and Jesus talks about that all the time, that belief is critical, these guys are losing belief. They're losing hope. And it turns out that that's not the end. Like, that's just a human condition that happens. And you shouldn't be ashamed of it. So what did they actually do? Well, number one, they're following God's plan for their life, right? They understand what they're supposed to do, even though they're not able to do it. And I think that's important for all of us. Like if you're discouraged, but you're completely lost in your connection with God, then it's going to be really hard to actually bring back that encouragement, because he's what brings that. And I say this often, you may not even realize that you have a relationship with God, because business is a spiritual game. And if you're being successful at it, then you're employing some principles that are God's principles. So like if you understand like what your mission is, even at a very high level, even if you don't know the next step, but you understand that you're supposed to be doing a certain thing, but you're discouraged. Here's what's interesting. Number one, they're honest with God. And so my pastor says this, pray what you got. And it's interesting. Pray what you got is not like this like beautiful buttoned up prayer. There's just times when you're exhausted, you're emotionally drained, you're frustrated, you're discouraged, maybe you're angry. These are all things that I feel often, or from time to time. But there are just times where that's the case, and it's okay to pray honestly to God and just tell him how you're feeling. Like, I had hoped, and now I'm disappointed, and I'm upset about it, and I don't even know what to do. That's the first thing that they do. The second thing, so they're honest, and they're like honest and transparent about their feelings and how they're feeling. But they don't give up. But they're honest and transparent about where they are in that, like where their energy tank is. It's pretty low. Where their hope tank is, it's pretty low. Second thing is, what's interesting is they keep going, literally. Like they're actually walking to a place. They literally continue down the path. And so I've been in this situation many times. And I'll tell you what I've done. And I've been encouraged by people to do this, which is when you're discouraged and you're not even sure if the path that you're taking is the right path. Like, you don't know if this is going to work. Maybe it's super risky. Like, maybe you don't want to. Maybe something changed or whatever. You keep walking down the path if it's not a path of a counter to God's principles of sin. Like, it's a path that you believed in. It's a path that maybe God told you to go down. And now there's some discouraging stuff happening. And you're kind of exhausted, and maybe you're frustrated, maybe you're angry that it's not actually working, and you're planting seeds, but things aren't growing. And that's a really hard feeling. One of the things is you just keep going unless the door closes. Like, one of the prayers that I pray in that situation is like, okay, I'm just going to keep obeying and keep walking down this path until you tell me a different path to walk down. And that's the only thing you can do. But what you can't do is just stop. Like, you can't do that. If it was told to you that you're supposed to go down this path, Then you walk the path until the door closes, the path closes, and a different path opens. But you don't stop just because you're discouraged. Like, that's the number one thing about leadership is you don't stop just because you're discouraged. That is one of the hardest things about leadership. I'll tell you, one of the most difficult things is when you're in gut-wrenching pain and you're actually scared. Like, because you're fighting a battle, right? So you're actually moving forward and you're actually scared. You're not sure if things are going to work or not. And you're having to stomach all of this stuff. And then you're still having to walk forward and lead. Get up every morning and actually put energy into actually leading and continuing to move forward. That is the hardest thing about being a business owner, entrepreneur, or a leader of any kind, in my opinion. And I'll tell you, there are seasons where that's like the norm. Like, there are certainly times where that's not the case, but there are certainly seasons. Like, I heard, like, Elon Musk has said this before, that business ownership is like staring into the abyss while eating glass. Now, I love business ownership, but because it gives me freedom. But it at times is not that's not untrue. Like, it's often very difficult. It's like eating glass. It's like staring into potential, because by staring into the abyss, it means like you're staring down the path that is the unlikely path because you're choosing to go against the odds. And that can be, if you have, so here's what's interesting about belief. Belief changes everything with that because it changes the circumstances. The circumstances are, this is objectively unlikely. Your belief and God's truth actually changes the odds, but you have to have it. So if you don't, so in your humanity, you're staring into the odds are against you. And that can be really scary. But I mean, that's what all great people do. When David fought Goliath, he was staring down the face of, 1 in a million odds or whatever it is. But his belief and his mission allowed him to do that with confidence and win. So it is interesting how often you have to keep going even when you're discouraged, but you have to keep going. There is no other option. No one's going to walk for you. No one's going to keep going for you. So you just have to do it. Like, that's part of the hard part of being a really successful person and a really successful leader, whatever you're leading. So they keep going. That's the second thing. The third thing is that they realize the reality. And I kind of alluded to this, but although they're discouraged and despairing and they're lacking hope, what's interesting is their minds are open to a different reality. Their minds are open. They still understand that God's truth supersedes the situation. And the reason I know that they understand that is because as Jesus started to show them himself and give them reasons to believe, they started to believe. They were open to the fact that maybe Jesus is alive, right? They didn't have a closed mind. I meet so many people. These are not usually successful people, by the way, but so many people that want something, but have a closed mind about being able to have it or being able to do it. So many people. And again, they're not successful people usually. And this is actually most people. Most of the population is this. So, for example, I want to get fit, healthy, and lose weight. I want to have a lot of muscle and energy. I want to feel better about myself. Maybe I need to because I have some sort of ailment or health issue. But then when I get into it, I actually don't believe it's possible. I don't believe it's possible for me to do it. So I think of every excuse as to why. Well, I'm not the type. I'm not the type of person that does get up early, or it's really hard. I can't. I've heard people. I'll fast for periods of time, and some people will be like, I just can't do that. Well, even if they had to, like for their health, like it's funny because with health, it's really simple. It's like work out and eat less. And if you eat zero and you work out, then you can actually change your body in the matter of like 20 days. You're 20 days away from like almost healing anything. But I don't believe I can't do it, is what a lot of people say. They close themselves off for any possibilities. I've seen people do this with other things. When there's an unlikely scenario for a situation, they're unwilling to believe that scenario is even possible. And so they predetermine the outcome. This is how losers and unsuccessful people lose consistently. Is by that, you literally predetermine the outcome. And so they're open to the possibility that they're wrong, that Jesus isn't still dead. And so when Jesus shows himself to them, and by the way, what's interesting is Jesus meets them where they are, right? So he doesn't shame them and leave them for being so little in faith, because he's actually he's hit them over the head a few times in other like prior to his crucifixion about like being little faith, ye of little faith, and how come you don't have faith and doubt and all this kind of stuff. Like he kind of like berates them a little bit for that in other passages, but here, when they really actually have very like it's waning, instead of telling them that they're wrong, he actually tries to bolster their hope by actually showing them that he's literally showing them that he is alive. And that's why he's like literally eating in their presence to make them believe that he's not a ghost. But I don't think he would have done that if their minds were closed off to the possibility of that being possible. And that is the point. They were open to the possibility of a miracle happening. They were open to the possibility that the circumstance they thought was happening, the reason they were discouraged, is actually not the thing. They were open to being re-encouraged. And that's super important for a leader, because I know a lot of people who are like addicted to discouragement and like addicted to, what's the word? Self-pity. Self-pity is a powerful drug. And what's interesting is you got to be very careful of this. It's very easy to be addicted to discouragement and self-pity, because it's a form of, it's a crazy thing with human nature in the mind, but like people like to wallow. And I felt that temptation before. Like it's easier to give up. It's easier when I'm discouraged and think this is hard and I'm angry and frustrated. It's easier to say, you know what? Like this is not possible anyway. I'm just going to stay in this place. And I understand that. It's just, I don't know how else to say it. I'm not really good with like some of these like careful, empathetic things. And I'm like this with myself too, but it's like, you just got to get up and go. Like there's just no other option. Like they're just not. No, and that does not to say whoever's like anyone's circumstance is not bad. It's just that The reality of it is like no one's coming to save you. So you got to do it. You've got to keep going. You've got to at least, and if this is it, it's not even just the physical energy. It's like you just have to be able to open your mind, just to open your mind up for the possibility. That's the key. So it's interesting to me. I don't think Jesus would have shown tried to I was going to say convince, but he actually tried to persuade them. Convincing this is a topic for another Devo, but I'll just say like convincing is different than persuasion. Persuasion is helping someone believe something they already want to believe but don't. Convincing is helping someone to believe something that they don't want to believe but you want them to believe. So Jesus wouldn't have tried to persuade them, I don't believe, if they weren't open to the possibility of what they see not being the reality, or their circumstance, or the likely circumstance not being the reality. I don't think he would have done it if they weren't open to a miracle. And so that's the thing. That's the third thing, is you need to be open to a miracle. You have to be open to being wrong. And to be open to being wrong, you really have to understand what is in Psalm 91. And I prayed, and it's a prayer for leaders. But in Psalm 91, it's very clear that it says, God's truth, your truth will be my shield and buckler. It's interesting. Your truth, God's truth is different than the fact. The truth is actually different than the facts. And so this is how you can be open to it, by understanding this. And I think when people like to close themselves off to possibilities, they don't understand the difference between the truth and the facts. So the fact are your circumstances. And you must understand that the truth is different than your circumstances. This is why things that are unlikely happen sometimes. It's also why things that are unlikely happen when you believe that they'll happen more than when they don't. It's because the truth is different than the circumstances. That actually violates and it goes against logic. It's the power that goes against logic. So you must understand this if you're going to have your mind open to the possibility. And so you have to be aware that God's truth is whatever, like he can do whatever he wants. And if he's promised you something, then that's the truth that you need to hold on to. It's interesting when I was fascinated by this. When David killed Goliath, it was a very unlikely scenario. Like he walked down, he's this little boy, he walks down to this giant who's a warrior, who is killed, like killing is his profession. and he goes down with absolute confidence. I've done the story before, and I'll link to that Devo, so that in the notes here. But like, what's interesting is he's not scared at all. He walks in with absolute confidence, and here's what I realized: the reason he did is because he understood God's truth was different than the facts and the circumstances. And God's truth was he had been anointed to be the king of Israel. That was the promise. So he knew, I'm not going to die here because God told me I'm going to be the king of Israel. So it's interesting. Now, he could have been like, well, what if God didn't tell me I'm the king of Israel? What if Samuel was wrong when he told me I was going to be the king of Israel? Like, that's what most of us do. That's what I do. Like, but he took the promise as the gospel, the word, the fact, and that superseded the actual facts of the situation. And so you must be aware of the difference between facts and truth, and specifically God's truth, in order to allow your mind to be open for a miracle, open for something unlikely to happen in the situation. So you don't have to necessarily even I've been in this place where, like, I don't have the energy to even imagine what a different situation could be like. So all I'm doing is just trying to make sure I'm not closed off to something happening overnight, you know? And it, like, that's it. It's not even like it's a beautiful passage because they were so low and Jesus didn't give up on them. And I felt that low before. And maybe you do. Maybe you felt that low before. And so, I hope this helped you. Listen, I'm going to do this. If you liked this episode, if you like this devotional, we do a weekly devotional for entrepreneurs from entrepreneurs, for business owners from business owners, for leaders from leaders. Like, that's what this is. I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a pastor. I'm a business owner who believes that God's success principles are right here in the Bible. And I do a weekly devotional for business owners. And sometimes we're dealing with concepts that are not even based specifically in Scripture. They might be mindset concepts. They might be personal development concepts and things like that. But if you liked this and you'd like to listen to more, go listen to more episodes. You can do that on Apple Podcasts. You can do that on Spotify. You can do that on YouTube. Go just search up the Growth Time Show or the Biz Devo on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to learn more. Or go to YouTube and search up kenott.com. And now, if you would share, like, or subscribe, whatever you can do, if you enjoyed this, share this with someone or leave a review or leave a comment, because that actually helps us be able to do this more. I've been getting some value out of this. Lastly, if you'd like to learn more about the Biz Devo, or you'd like to sign up to get these sent to you, you can go to bizdevo.com. That's bizdevo.com. If you'd like to learn more about me, Kenneth Ott, maybe how to work with me, or maybe what I do outside of this, because this is only one thing. I'm actually, I'm a business owner of various different businesses. I have consulting businesses, etc. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can visit kenott.com. That's KENOTT.com. And you can become a better business owner. That is my goal for you. And so if you'd like to do that, go there and sign up and learn more. And until next time, thanks, and never stop growing.